Hello YouTube, it's the Frog Queen here, and today I'm interviewing comic book writer and illustrator Tom Neely. Tom is most well known for his series Henry and Glenn Forever and the Image comic series The Humans. He has also self-published some very dramatic wordless books known as The Blot and The Wolf. In this interview today, we're going to discuss his upcoming projects and of course discuss a bit about his past ones. How are you? You're in your studio.
Yep.
That's awesome. And Humans right there.
Yeah, I got some of the artwork out so I could show.
That's awesome.
That works, so. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, why don't we just dive right in? I love your mug, by the way.
Thanks.
I just got this in the mail today.
Cool.
So look at, it's like amazing how they print these things. I mean, it's IDW, you know.
Oh, yeah.
They print...
Is that I think my friend colored those.
Oh, really?
Is the colors? Yeah.
This is the Ultimate Collection, right? So the original...
Yeah. Oh, cool. The black and white? Cool.
Yeah, the original ones. Which I have some of the original comics, but I'm missing them, so I wanted to be able to read it from the beginning to end, you know, on paper.
Yeah. Yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
I haven't read them in a long time.
So, I guess maybe we should start with, what are you working on right now? Let's start there.
Okay, right now, I've been working on my own graphic novel. It's called The Devil. Is that backwards, or is that just backwards on my camera?
It's just backwards on yours.
Oh. So this is my first Skype ever. But anyway, yeah, it's my new graphic novel. I'm writing and drawing myself, and I'm about, I think I'm about 30 way through penciling it. So I've got about 40 pages penciled so far. It's I kind of consider it the third in a loose trilogy of books that I've done, including my first graphic novel, The Blot, and my second one, The Wolf. So then the third one is The Devil. They're not really connected, but except for the three that I've done completely myself. So.
But they do have themes, I noticed.
Are we breaking up?
Nope, I'm fine on my end. Are you okay on yours? Is it dropping?
Now you're back.
Okay. But both The Blot and The Wolf have themes that kind of bring them together, like visually.
Yeah, I mean they're loosely tied together because they're my more personal art vision. You know, they're all three surrealistic. They're all kind of like horror / love stories or doomed love stories or so they're kind of tied together artistically, I think, more than like they're not like actual like sequels. The stories aren't necessarily related to each other, but yeah, just by nature of coming out of my brain, I think there are a lot of thematic similarities between the three. So yeah, if anybody's read The Blot and the Wolf and they liked them, I hope you'll like The Devil. But I think The Devil's going to be even weirder than those. So
what's the focus on with The Devil? What's the focus or the storyline kind of about?
Oh, I can't really talk about that. But,
okay, all right.
But it's I mean, it's sort of a gothic horror, southern gothic horror kind of, but it's surrealistic and it's probably the most non-linear story I've written before. So it's kind of disjointed and hops around, and it'll probably confuse people, and some people will hate it. But I don't know. It's the book I need to do right now. So yeah, that's what I'm up to. I'm also working on a couple of pitches for some potentially cool projects for next year, but I can't divulge those yet. But
I understand. Yeah. I understand how that works. The Devil, is it going to be a self-published work, or is it going to be on one of the labels that you've been working with lately?
I'm hoping to not self-publish it. I thought about self-publishing it just so that all three of them would be self-published, but I kind of like being published now, so I'm going to see who's interested. I think Image has said they'd take a look at it, and I've got connections to a few other publishers that I'm interested in shopping it to, but yeah, we'll see. If nobody wants it, then I'll self-publish. So.
Both the Blot and the Wolf were self-published, right? Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why I thought.
Yes.
I've got some of them behind me. I think I actually lent the Blot to a friend to read.
Is the Blot?
Yes, yeah. That one I lent to someone. I was like, "Oh, you should check this out," kind of thing, because that's why it's not behind me. I wanted to ask you actually, when because which one was your very, very first work? I don't actually know.
The Blot was my first major real work. I mean, I started doing comics back in '98, just like mini comics and zines and stuff. But I got started drawing. I first drew the first chapter of the Blot as a mini comic in 2005, and then I completed the rest of the book in 2006 and published it in 2007. So that's technically probably my first major work, but it was in a bunch of anthologies and mini comics and other stuff before that. But yeah, and it was my first venture into actual self-publishing, not just doing 100 mini comic zines. I did a print run of 3,000 and had it professionally printed and everything. So it was my first venture into real publishing. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning.
What's that like? Self-publishing to me always looks very scary, and I'm sure it does to so many other people. It's kind of like how do you even begin to figure out how to do it?
Well, luckily I had the guidance of a lot of really good friends that I met along the way from going to comic shows and stuff. I mean, the first comic I published in 1999 was I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know how to use Photoshop or anything. I just I think I literally just Xeroxed the actual pages at Kinko's and assembled the book together, and it cost way too much because I didn't know what I was doing. But I went to my first San Diego Comic-Con that year, and I started meeting other people who do mini comics and stuff, and befriended them, and started learning from seeing what they were doing and how they printed them and stuff. By the time I got to the point of doing the Blot, like I said, I originally published the first chapter as a mini comic, and I actually had interest from Top Shelf at the time, wanted to publish it. So I was working with them. But I was also, around that time, I became really good friends with Dylan Williams, who ran Sparkplug Comics out of Portland, Oregon. And he was a big proponent of self-publishing. That's how he started and grew it to become an actual publishing company later. So I was working with him because I'd go to conventions with him and help him out with his publishing company and stuff. And while I was working on the Blot and talking about the deal with Top Shelf, and it just didn't feel right what they wanted to do with the book versus my vision. So I was talking to Dylan, and he was just like, just do it yourself. You don't really need them. You can figure it out. I can help you do it. So, with a lot of help from people like Dylan, and even Jordan Crane helped a bit with some printing suggestions and how to set up files and stuff. Jesse Recklaw is a good friend of mine. He helped with a little bit of editing and advice and stuff. So I got a lot of help from a lot of friends to figure out how to get all the pieces together and put together a book that actually felt professional rather than homemade. So, yeah, a lot of credit goes to learning from my friends.
Well, it 100% does not feel homemade, and it feels very far from a zine, which is what I'm used to. I'm used to zines in a lot of ways, and that's stuff that I produced when I was a teenager, was very much zine quality, Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, it's important to learn that stuff,
Yeah.
To make your mistakes and figure out how to make them better every time,
It's so far away.
I still make little zines all the time, so.
But it's amazing that you can your first work is actually super professional, looks super, super professional. I mean, it's because a lot of times I talk to comic book creators and they'll talk about the first thing they published, and a lot of the times it really is a zine, that's kind of what they did. But anyway, I can hear everything fine. Can you?
Okay. Yeah, you just turn into a jittery robot every once in a while.
Okay. Well, as long as you can hear me.
Yeah,
all right.
Okay.
Well, why don't I ask you, since we're in your studio, can you tell me a little bit about your process? Because I know you did mention that you learned how to use Photoshop later, but most of your work is done through pen, pencil, and ink, right?
Yeah, I draw everything traditionally, ink on paper, and do all the lettering by hand. But eventually, everything has to go into the computer to get it to print anyway. So, or if you're coloring, sometimes like The Humans was colored by Christina Collantes in Photoshop, but all the pages were done by hand, ink and paper. Like I pulled a few of them out. Like here's the big spread from the issue 1.
Oh, I love this one. That's the best. That's my favorite.
Some of the pages from issue 0. The first couple of pages from the issue 0 that we did, self-published. Good one.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I had no idea how big they were.
Yeah, I draw big for a few reasons. I went to school. I went to school, art school for painting, and then kind of went back to comics because I got sick of the fine arts world. So, but I was always working bigger then. So, and I mostly draw with a brush rather than pens or nibs. So,
oh wow, I didn't
just
know
prefer
that.
to draw bigger. So, and then I used to have when I was working as an animator, computer animator for years, I developed some really bad wrist problems, and from drawing on the computer all the day, and then switching to drawing larger actually helped fix that. And then I went through that again halfway through The Humans. I actually got a severe like rotator cuff injury.
Ooh.
Because I was drawing like 12 hours a day,
Right.
and I was at the gym like trying to lift weights and put some meat on these skinny bones at the same time. But I like really fucked up my shoulder. I woke up one morning in the middle of issue 7, and I couldn't lift this arm without screaming out loud. But and then I made myself ink a page before I went to the ER, and then
Oh my God.
they misdiagnosed me with shingles, and so I just was in pain for like 3 months until finally another doctor said I had rotator cuff injury, and so yeah.
I have
Anyway,
actually had that
drawing
same
large
injury.
helps.
I've had that same injury because I'm writing all day at work.
Yeah.
Anyways, and I also, because I lift weights, I lift heavy, I actually was bench pressing on a day where I probably just shouldn't have been because I was overextenuating my arms.
I think that's what I did.
And literally that day I felt a pop in my shoulder when I was benching. And when I went to go pour my tea at work, I couldn't actually lift my arm up at all. It was just done.
Yeah, that's how I woke up that day. And I literally just came in here and just like went,
Yeah.
and I inked the page, and then went to the ER.
It's scary though, right? And of course.
Yeah, but I was like, but I have to finish a page today or I'll miss deadline. So I was like.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally get that. That's horrible. Ugh. Well, I think it's really interesting that you do actually draw on such big pieces, because I was talking to Shaky Kane. Oh, I just finished reading. I just got this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that was great.
It's awesome. I love it. And Shaky was telling me, he always, yeah. I don't have that, but
Oh yeah.
I seen it. Yeah, I seen it like post later on. Yeah.
He's awesome. I love his art.
He's amazing. He made my my logo in the corner there.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he also draws very large, like panels.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Like one panel is like a huge piece of paper, and then they shrink it down. And I always find that really interesting because I also have a problem drawing details small. I've always had to draw things large too, but no one tells you these things until you really start talking to a lot of artists, and they're like, a lot of people do that, they draw this amazing detail, and you think it's like, because it's on this tiny page, but no, everybody just shrinks everything down. I don't know, I found that really interesting, especially because when I was in art school, it wasn't good. Nobody told me these things,
Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, I went to school for painting, so I didn't like learn anything about comics or illustration there. They were actually very much against comics and illustration at the time.
Wow.
So,
where was that?
But San Francisco Art Institute. It's yeah. It was a fun school. I didn't really fit in there because I wanted to do painting, and the school was more featured towards like new genres and like conceptual art and stuff. And then but I slogged through. I actually ended up like making just like large scale comic panels as oil paintings and small ones too. But yeah, basically did one panel comic gags as oil paintings and got an MFA for doing comics at a school that hated comics. So
that's kind of awesome, though.
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah. Oh, but back to the size. You're asking me about process. I actually try to change my process with like every project I do.
Okay.
And approach it differently. So I'm actually like with the devil. You can see I'm drawing like a quarter of the size.
Oh wow.
And part of that is because I decided this year I wanted to be able to make myself draw more on the road when I'm traveling, because last year I spent so much time touring for the Humans Volume 2, and I'm not really good at drawing on the road. I tend to want to be isolated in this room with nobody around. But yeah, but I hang out with like Benjamin Marra and Ed Pisker at shows, and they just like at night, instead of going to the bar and getting wasted, they sit in their room and hang out and draw pages. I'm like, I could be doing that, but so anyway, I'm trying to force myself to be able to draw on the road, and so I'm making myself draw smaller this time. So, yeah. But I'm interested to see how that'll affect my inking style and how it'll change the art, because I always want to change up my art style with every book too, just to keep myself interested.
Yeah, well, everything you do is like kind of different. Like it's still like I know it's your work when I see it, but it slightly varies. Like when I go from like something like Popeye to like Harry and Glenn, there's so much. There is a big range of difference there. But I think you had told me previously that you really enjoyed like early kind of cartoony comics, like I forget what we were talking about specifically. Like I thought we were talking about like Betty Boop for some reason, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when I was in art school and I started getting kind of fed up with what I was getting disillusioned with the fine arts world, and I didn't really want to go into like gallery painting scene. So I was kind of like looking at what else I wanted to do, and I'd always drawn comics in my whole life, but I grew up in a small town in Texas where all I knew was like Spider-Man and Superman comics. So I didn't discover like underground comics until I was in art school when I was like 22 or so. So like naturally when I got older, I kind of gravitated towards painting because I was like, I'm too old for Spider-Man. But then in art school, I discovered Robert Crumb and Renee French, and then like Craig Thompson and Art Spiegelman and all that stuff. And I was like, whoa, you can make comics about anything. So, but and at the same time, I was in art school studying painting, and one of my teachers introduced me to Philip Guston, who was a abstract painter who switched to doing more figurative stuff that was largely influenced by early comic strips. And that kind of like got me back into a lot of the comics that I read as a kid, like Betty Boop and Popeye, and then he was influenced by early comic strip art of the 30s. Philip Guston was, and so I started looking at the stuff that he was into, and that reminded me that when I was like very young, when I was like learning to read, my grandmother had given me that big Smithsonian book of comic strips.
Oh, okay.
It's I could go grab it, but it'd take too long, but it's a great book of like comics. So that's kind of what I learned to read on. So it all kind of came back to me that I had this love of early comics, and that's what kind of led to the style of the blot, which is very influenced by like kind of Fleischer style animation, like Betty Boop and E.C. Segar's Popeye, and then the stuff that I was into in art school, like Rene Magritte, Surrealism, Salvador Dali, that kind of stuff. So it all kind of came together with the blot. Then I moved on from there, but yeah. But that kind of also led me to do Popeye, because I always loved Popeye. I have Popeye anchors. I don't know if you can see them.
Oh yeah, I totally can. That's awesome. You need the can of
so
spinach
I did
too.
this. Like Popeye comic where he basically has an existentialist crisis and spends a few pages beating himself up, and it just devolves and gets weirder, and as he's kind of losing his mind. But I just did this as like a little mini comic zine, and that actually ended up getting me weirdly hired to work on this series. That, and I knew Roger Landridge from comic conventions, but I'd sent that mini comic to Craig Yo, and then he hired me to fill in on a couple of issues of Popeye, so that was really fun to do, but didn't carry on. Things didn't work out, so I moved back onto that. But that led me to go work on Henry and Glenn Forever again afterwards. So anyway, sorry, I'm jumping around a bit.
Well, basically, I wanted to ask you, when was the first Harry and Glenn? Because I don't actually know when the first one came out.
So, it goes back to probably 2004. Me and three of my good friends who are also artists started what we called an art fraternity called the Igloo Tornado. And it was just like four artists that like to hang out, critique each other's work, and have beers and talk about art and stuff. We ended up having a few art shows together locally too. But at some point, I was doing a lot of conventions and zine shows and stuff, and I was like, we should do a zine together of some sort. And we were hashing out ideas, and one night we were at a bar, and my buddy Matthew, like after like 4 or 5 beers, was like, there should be a book of like Tom of Finland art, but with Henry Rollins and Glenn Danzig. And I was just like, we're going to do that. So the first one, well, this isn't actually the first iteration, but the first one was just like a self-published Xerox zine we put together, but this compiled the first 2 zines that we did together, self-published. But they're literally like mostly just like bar napkin doodles that we just like did to amuse each other while we were having beers.
Nice.
But we printed like 50 copies of the first zine, and I took it to San Diego Comic-Con, thinking whatever, this is just like the dumbest thing I've ever done, but see if people like it. And I sold out of like all of them immediately, and like I think by the end of the week I had like people offering me a publishing deal for it.
That's awesome.
But I ended up purposely going to Microcosm Publishing because by the recommendation of Dylan Williams, my friend from Sparkplug, because they're a small punk rock publishing company, and they were very skeptical at first. They didn't want to do it because they were kind of worried about it being like possibly offensive. And I was like, well, but isn't that what punk rock's supposed to be? Yeah. But anyway, like Joe Beal, one of the people behind Microcosm, ended up publishing it under his own imprint, not under Microcosm, as a zine. That was a smaller version of this. And at first he was also skeptical. He was like, he only printed like 500, and they sold out in like one day. So then we expanded a little more, and then came out with this version. I think this one finally came out in 2009. So the first zine was 2005. By 2009, it came out in this form. And Microcosm ended up being a perfect fit because they are connected to the punk scene and like independent bookstores and stuff. So even though the book was rejected by Diamond and traditional comic stores because they're like, I don't know what the fuck this is, like it like exploded in the punk rock and music scene and sold everywhere in record stores and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so at one point, I think it like hit the point where it had sold like 70,000 copies, and then finally Diamond Comics Distribution was like, I think we want to carry this book now.
Yeah, so, now you care, Diamond.
Anyway, I've always had a problem with Diamond, so anyway.
You and the rest of the comic book world.
Yeah.
I don't think you're alone there. I always hear complaints about Diamond. And even when...
Yeah, it's one of those traps we're stuck in for some reason.
Unfortunately, what do they call that? Monopoly? I think they call that a monopoly.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, I was
But,
trying to find my original copies this is the one that you sent me, but I actually have the tiny floppies that are also this size.
Right. Well, that actually.
I have them somewhere in a box with a bunch of other comics.
Breaking up again.
Oh.
Hold on a sec.
You good?
Oh. There, you're back.
Okay.
What were you asking?
Do you actually have those original ones? I was trying to find them in one of my boxes, but those, yes, I have those. Yeah. All of yeah.
Yeah. These actually came after this, so people get really confused about all of them. And I have to also explain it. So this is the original book by me and Igloo Tornado. It's just 4 of us. So while I was doing this, I was working on The Wolf, which was my second graphic novel, and this took me about 4 years to do, and it was my, very serious effort at making like a really serious art book. Meanwhile, this dumb thing was selling like crazy, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? So anyway, like the Pop Microcosm encouraged me, and all my friends encouraged me to do a sequel. So, and I never wanted to like do a sequel because I don't like to repeat myself, but when I became friends with Ed Luce, who I think he already told the story about how we met. But he was like, if you ever do anything more, I want to do something. And so I immediately started thinking like, well, if I thought of it in a different way and did more like long form stories and had more artists come in and share into the contributions and just expand this world to make it weirder and weirder. So that's when I started doing the miniseries with issue 1. It was a 4-issue miniseries, but there's a variant cover for each one. So that confuses people.
That's probably where I got confused as well.
Yeah, and then they were all collected in here. But when I collected it for this book, there's about 110 more pages by more artists.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So all of this is in here, but then there's more in here. So anyway, we confuse people. That's what publishers do, I guess.
Well, no, it's good. It's good. I like it because I like to collect floppies, and I like to collect collected volumes of floppies. So I totally get. Me
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was really fun to like do variant covers for each of them too, because like I grew up reading like Image comics and everything, and like though I think variants are kind of ridiculous, it's also kind of a cool way to get extra art. So variant, I did like the regular covers of each one.
I'm guilty of buying multiple copies of the same comic because of the cover variants. I'm guilty of that.
Jim Rugg did this brilliant one. And then this is my friend Levon Jahanian, who was a member of the Igloo Tornado. Shaky Kane, we already talked about him.
Which I think that might be the only one I don't have. No, I don't have that one. I don't have that one either.
Christina Coyantes, who is the colorist on the Humans.
Oh, okay.
Did that one. And then these were mine. This is the first one I did.
Yeah,
it's kind of like old romance cover.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know do you know the story of this cover?
No, I don't know the story behind it. Do tell.
So their Danzig logo, the skull with the horns that he's used since his first album, he stole it from a cover of a comic called Crystar that was published by Marvel. And the cover was drawn by Michael Golden. And the cover, this is a parody of that cover where I replaced Crystar with Glenn and Crystar's girl with Henry. And these are like, I replaced the dragons with cherubs, and then Danzig's skull. But yeah, if you look up, I think it's Crystar number 6. But Danzig stole his logo from that comic that was drawn by Michael Golden, and he still denies it. He still claims that he designed it. So I stole it back for for Michael Golden. And then I actually met Michael Golden at Heroes Con a couple years ago, and I gave him a copy, and he seemed very confused, so I don't think he understood the joke.
I guess maybe he didn't know Danzig, or of Danzig, but my inside jokes about Danzig go on for years. Like, I know, the fact that he would steal someone's art and make his own logo out of it, like, which I didn't know that, but the fact that he would do that, it does sound 100% typical of Danzig. Yeah. Anyway, that's hilarious. That's golden.
Yeah.
Alright, well, I want to change the topic slightly from Danzig for a second, because I do want to ask you what your favorite project that you ever worked on actually was. Because we haven't even made it to, like, the humans yet or anything, but, like, what was your favorite project that you've ever worked on? If you can, pick one.
Favorite? I don't know. I mean, they've all been a different process, and they've all been rewarding in different ways. I mean, in some ways, the humans was probably one of my favorites because it's the first time I was able to become a full-time cartoonist and just draw comics all day. I cut out all my other freelance work. But, that also proved very difficult. It was also one of the hardest jobs ever. It was the best, hardest job I've ever had. So I'd never been on a monthly schedule for a title, so that was difficult. And collaborating with a team, not just Keenan, but also the colorist Christina, and I had an art assistant working with me too. But it was a great experience, but it was also the hardest job I've ever had. So, down to the shoulder injury, but yeah, I don't know. It was awesome. But I definitely, by the time I got to the end of it, I needed a break, and that's why I'm switching to do my own book right now, because I can kind of work on my own pace and just stay in my own head. Because even though I love the experience of collaborating that I've done through like Henry and Glenn and the Humans, I also really like just getting in my own head and doing my own work too. So switching back and forth, it's always a different experience. It's hard to say which I love the most, but
okay, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So, all right. How about? Oh, I wanted to actually ask you about like how much of a role that music actually plays in a lot of your comics. I mean, it's obvious with Henry and Glenn that that music does play a role for you. And you did tell me that you did do a soundtrack to The Wolf.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Music's always been a big influence on me. I think I've always been jealous of people that were good enough to learn their instruments well enough to be in bands, but I was too busy drawing to. But I do dabble in music myself. But my brother's a real musician and composer, so it's always been around me. And but I was always. I mean, like I discovered the Misfits in 6th grade and kind of like exploded my brain, and I've always been ever since searching for weird music, because at the time I was like in a small town in Texas and the only like kid who had ever heard punk rock, and like so I just like was like, oh, there's weird shit out there, I should go look for it. So that led me, once I was in college and I started meeting other people that were in bands and stuff, I just always wanted to be around musicians. So, and I've done a lot of artwork for various bands, album covers and flyers and posters and t-shirts and stuff.
Who have you done work for? Band-wise?
Sorry?
What bands have you done work for?
I started working with Hydra Head Records, which was Aaron Turner from the band ISIS, his record label. And so I did a lot of artwork for ISIS, mostly t-shirts and posters, and one limited edition album cover. And then a few of their other bands. And that actually led me to doing the Melvins comic that they actually published along with a box set that the Melvins put out with Hydra Head Records.
Which I have to say, the Melvins is still one of my favorite bands of all time, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, massively.
Yeah, the best.
and I actually only just got their latest album on vinyl. I wanted it since it came out. I think it came out in April, and I was like, oh, I can't afford it right now. And
I know.
it's so expensive to import vinyl to Nova Scotia. So,
I bet.
it's like, I think that album cost me like $45. Like, like it was kind of unreal. But I'm like, it's the Melvins. They're worth it.
They're always worth it. Yeah, so that was another, like, dream job to, like, get to work with them. Even though I didn't ever actually get to work with them. They were just kind of like, yeah, do whatever you want. So, yeah, so it was awesome to work with them. I've done some artwork for Wolves in the Throne Room, Ides of Gemini, Green Day.
Oh,
I did
wow.
a record cover for Green Day because they're fans of Henry and Glenn, and they called me up.
Which one for Green Day?
It was a limited edition record store day release from 2 years ago called Demolicious. It was a collection of demo songs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, yes, and various. I've been doing a series of re-releases from a '90s pop punk band called the Groovy Ghoulies. They've been re-releasing all their albums and having me do new artwork for all of them.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's been, yeah. So yeah, music's. I've always been interested in working with bands, and I hang out more with musicians than artists. Actually, Zigzags are pals of mine. They actually did the first Human song along with Keenan's wife's band, the Smelly Tongues. So that was when we published our issue 0. We put out a 7-inch record with a split with the Zigzags and the Smelly Tongues, and then after we did that, we were like, well, we should just do this with every issue. Put out a song or two with every issue. So we just started contacting all our friends who were in bands and reaching out and seeing who was interested, and then in the back letters column of every issue of the Humans, there was a download thing on SoundCloud where you could get a couple of free songs that were written for the comic. So it was just like, the same way we did with the back covers. We had a different artist do a back cover pinup every time. It was just trying to expand our horizons. But I've always been interested in having music be a component to comics. Like you said, The Wolf, I ended up composing my own soundtrack to it, but originally when I was working on the book, Aaron Turner from ISIS and Hydra Head was going to compose a soundtrack, and we were going to release it together. But that kind of fell through because he had a lot of other projects going on. And so I just did it myself. I was like, I guess I'll try to do another album. Because I hadn't really done any music in 15 years. I was in bands in college and stuff, but I did it. Been wanting to do it again, so I might record some music to go along with The Devil. So
okay.
We'll see.
That'll be awesome.
But yeah, we ended up releasing, I think, probably 26 original songs along with the Humans for the soundtrack. So
I didn't know that many.
Yeah, I think they might still all be up on our SoundCloud. If you look on SoundCloud, the Humans sound.
I definitely have missed a bunch of them. When I was getting, I get them all the time, regularly when they came out, and then definitely would be yeah, I'm definitely gonna go back and download that, and then forget, because my stack of comics. We would take them
down and put them back up, but I think for a while we had them all up. I think they might still be up.
Maybe that's why too. Yeah, because my stack of comics to read, my to read list is just disgustingly ridiculous.
Barky. Sorry.
Your dog's name is Barky?
Yeah, and she was just barking.
Can you pick her up for the camera?
Poor Barky.
Barky? It sounds like the biggest dog, honestly.
She doesn't like being picked up, but
she's not that big. Oh, she's cute. She does look like a burger.
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's always by tripping me up when I'm walking around my studio.
That's awesome.
I get a standing table. I switched to that back process, but when I started working on the Humans, I switched to a standing table, which I recommend to every cartoonist because I think it saved my back. Didn't save my shoulder, but it saved my back.
I have a standing desk at work, so I can attest to that as well. So I have one last thing I want to request, but you can say no. can you show me any images from the devil? The one you're working on now? Like, one image? And again, you can say no.
Well, I don't know what you can see it because it's just penciled, but here's one.
Oh, we can see it. Yeah, we can see it. Okay. This is exciting. I'm excited.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, okay, I won't take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for coming on my show and doing this. This means a lot to me. And thank you so much for actually sending me books and stuff that I can't even get here, honestly. Very limited what we can get sometimes in Nova Scotia. We are kind of in the ass end of Canada. But I do hope you'll come to HowlCon next year. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I'll try.
Yeah.
Be fun.
All right. Are you going to make any appearances at any upcoming cons that everybody should know about?
The only thing I have left this year is DCon. It's called DesignerCon or DCon. It's here in LA, and it's mostly a toy show, but we have Henry and Glenn Muscle Men coming out.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, I don't know if you remember Muscle Man, the little rubber wrestling figures,
yes,
but yeah.
I do.
So that's the only thing I'm doing this year, but next year I hope to do WonderCon, maybe TCAF, San Diego, of course, Heroes, and maybe HowlCon. I don't know, we'll see. Depends on how much drawing I have to do, too, so.
For sure.
But DCon here. But yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a productive rest of your day.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.